Doom: The Dark Ages is a good game. It could even be a very good game. Problem is, it's following on from an even better one. It's impossible for the game to avoid comparisons to its predecessor, Doom Eternal, which was excellent. I'd say for what it was almost flawless. In a way, it was id Software who were the ones who were doomed. Did they attempt to build upon perfection? Or did they instead go back to the drawing board to come up with a different gameplay loop for this game? Well, that's what they ended up doing, and I commend them for trying it, and there are bits of it that do work, but overall it does feel like a step backwards. The classic Doom experience is still here. Every encounter feels like it pushes you more than the previous one did. I know that's the case with most games, but especially here. It is very well tuned. And there's always that dread that the next enemy engagement could be the one that's too difficult for you to beat. That never really comes, and after you've beaten the game you can return to any earlier segment and find it so easy you wonder how you ever found it hard in the first place. That's what Doom games are about, that sense of progression. It's so incredibly rewarding, and it's as present here in this game as it was in Doom Eternal. And the shield serves as a versatile and powerful tool at your disposal, used to block attacks, to deflect projectiles, and to stall a particular enemy while you engage the others. It's a cool mechanic, I just wish I had 2 of these shields, and maybe 3 for the later stages. But the main problem with the Dark Ages is Doom Eternal. It's common to prefer what you're familiar with, I get that. But with the Dark Ages, I played through the whole thing. I've racked up almost as many hours in it as I did with Doom Eternal, and yet when I returned to Eternal after being more familiar with Dark Ages, I still preferred the feel of Eternal. And that's a problem. Your first impressions will be the visuals. Doom Eternal still looks great, but that first impression of the Dark Ages will make you question whether it's a game from 2025 or 2015. Look, if I switch to Eternal, its visuals are so much brighter and poppier. How did the Dark Ages manage to look so wrong? It's based on a new, improved id Tech 8 game engine, built from the ground up, using ray tracing as standard, but none of that matters when its visuals are just shades of grey, ugly and washed out. Look at Eternal! Immediately more inviting and interesting, delivering an endless Technicolor spectacle, compared with the Dark Ages' dark and aged feel. I played through both of these games with HDR on. Maybe it's overdone in Eternal, but Doom is a game where everything should be ramped up to 11. The visuals shouldn't be dull and grey. Indeed, jumping back to Eternal afterwards, I was stopping to marvel all sorts of little visual effects and gorgeous distant displays, and even how I could see my character in reflections of stuff. Sure, it's a pointless detail, but a welcome one nonetheless, and one that does justice to the overhead of ray tracing. Yet in the Dark Ages, I don't think I noticed my character's reflection once. Baffling. The one improvement with the Dark Ages graphics is to its destruction. Run into anything and it explodes. Maybe a bit too easily, but it's better than not exploding at all. And if you land from a height, there's a satisfying whomp, and everything turns to dust around you, and all the lights and chains overhead jingle about. It definitely feels like your character has heft, weight, and this buys into the whole idea that you're more of a tank in this game. And the deformable enemy damage is gorgeous too. Here's some examples right here. I never thought I'd say this, but if anything, this effect is a little bit overdone, and you can reduce some of the enemies down to just a bunch of bones held together with chunks of meat long before they're ready to be killed. So there's definitely an oomph to the Dark Ages that I'd say one-ups the feel of Eternal. But this is countered by the lack of glory kills. A staple of Eternal, a welcome breather in the midst of battle, and the Dark Ages doesn't have such a powerful rhythm to the gameplay. Another problem with the Dark Ages is the audio. Eternal's soundtrack is threatening, ominous, powerful. I don't even like this sort of music, yet even I can tell it fits this game perfectly, and I've grown to like it because of it. That and the violent, abrupt audio cues as you go for glory kills. It bigs this game up as being Doom! Doom in capital letters! The Dark Ages has none of this. The music isn't absent, but it isn't punching in quite the same way. The only time I really noticed the soundtrack was when it was stuck on in the background when there weren't any enemies around. After I had cleared an area and there was probably like one last minion stuck on the scenery somewhere, and I just had to end up turning down the music as I was trying to solve a puzzle somewhere with full metal orchestra blasting at me endlessly in the background. Overall, there's nothing wrong with how the Dark Ages does its audio. It's just that, again, Eternal does it better. And also the gameplay. Now, in the Dark Ages defense, when I returned to Eternal, I missed the shield. It felt like a tool was missing from my arsenal, and I thought of how awesome it would be if the next Doom game could somehow combine the best of both games. But you know what Eternal had that the Dark Ages didn't? Verticality, double jumps, all sorts of aerial acrobatics that literally add an extra dimension to the experience. So what with the Dark Ages lacking this vertical element, I think it does admirably with its very flat combat. But it is flat, and it is lacking a valuable extra dimension, both to its combat and to the navigation between the arenas when Eternal's happily chucking cool puzzles and jump challenges at you. Something that annoyed me throughout the Dark Ages was how simple all the secrets on the level were. Everything was so easy to discover. There was nothing hidden up ledges like in Eternal, since this game makes it abundantly clear that it's all very flat, and that unless there's a clear route up somewhere, you aren't able to ascend beyond the confines of the flat arena that you're currently fighting in. And again, returning to Eternal, it immediately reminded me of how creative and devious some of its secret areas were. It really feels like a different development team was behind each of these games. That being said, later on in the Dark Ages, there were a couple of very Quake-esque puzzle rooms that defied the rules of gravity and stuff, and these were quite cool, if only briefly used. They definitely stood out against the other 95% of the game's experience. I just wish these clever puzzles would have been a bigger percentage. So that's the comparisons with Eternal out of the way. I had to do it because everyone else is doing it, it's inevitable that you'll do it when you play this game, but looking at the Dark Ages in a vacuum for now, what is its gameplay loop like? Well, it's very heavily reliant on quick time events. Orange projectiles that you must dodge or block, and green ones that you can deflect back at the enemies who threw them at you. Given how quickly these things defeat the enemies who chuck them, it makes you wonder why they even chuck them at you in the first place, doesn't it? It feels like the enemies defeat themselves. Another example of this is the shield enemies. Early on in the game, you're pitted against a lowly grunt armed with a machine gun and a shield, and I swear it was one of the toughest moments of the game for me. You can't block their attacks forever, and firing back at them for any period of time is met to a barrage of bullets coming back at you. Your only option is to close the distance and to either flank them or to heat up the shield until it shatters. I was terrified. I was thinking, if I'm struggling so much with just one of these, what happens when the game starts throwing combinations of enemies at me? But here's the thing, that doesn't ever really happen. By the time it does, you have all sorts of weapons and tools at your disposal to shatter these shields in one shot, and a lot of these enemies come with their own shields preheated. Hit these with any more than a pea shooter and they shatter into armor collectibles for you to gather. Again, the enemies defeat themselves, but it's more than that. They're serving as health pickups for you to use. I don't expect to find logic in a Doom gameplay loop, but it was baffling to me throughout this game why demon hordes would make it this easy for you. It would literally be harder if they didn't have shields, or if these enemies just didn't exist at all. Here I am fighting demons and supposedly stuck in a frantic bloodlusted battle, yet I still found time to ask myself why these enemies existed every time I demolished a row of them in a single shield throw. Fun, perhaps? I know I promised not to compare it with Eternal anymore, but even the grunts in that older game were at least a challenge if you didn't notice one of them lunging towards you and trying to munch on your shoulder. In the Dark Ages, most of the enemies in the arena seem solely there to help you against the harder enemies within the arena. Ah yes, the mini-bosses. Alone, any of these can be quite challenging, but fun and beaten by timing your blocks and super shotgun blasts in between. Where it becomes challenging is when the game throws several of these things against you. A lot of games would avoid this sort of challenge, but Doom revels in it. And it's okay until you block something that you weren't meant to block, which then punishes you by removing your shield for a few seconds, which in this game is almost guaranteed death. And it prompted me to rage quit a few times, before hastily returning for just one more go, because despite all my criticism, it is still a really fun and addictive game. I do like how most enemies in this game have specific weaknesses, and that there is a logical order in which to beat enemies in an arena, and there is some satisfaction to planning this out and executing it. When to the uninitiated, watching your screen, it looks like all you're doing is mindlessly ripping and tearing until it is all done. The one enemy that ruins all this for me is the Keiko Demon. This is one of the first enemies you'd face in earlier games, and they're defeatable with a well-placed grenade to the mouth. But in this game, they are now end-of-game mini-boss challenges, hiding behind an electrified shield most of the time and hurling shaped attacks at you that you must dodge. This is all entirely unfun and just irritating to deal with. It doesn't fit in with the rules the rest of the enemies in the arena abide by, and because of that I'd often just waste my most powerful attacks taking these things down so I could then just enjoy the rest of the arena experience. It's almost like this game's challenge was maxed out and the developers decided to break the rules they had created just to up the difficulty level for the final few levels. So in that respect, I guess the Keiko Demons are a bit like the Marauder from Eternal. That guy was invincible apart from at very select moments in his attack routine, and he caused quite a few problems for people playing the game. But even with the Marauder, I found he blended in quite well with the rest of the arena by the end of that game. But in the Dark Ages, the Keiko Demon never blends in. I mean, look at it, it's even floating above the battlefield of a game that's otherwise very flat. This thing doesn't belong in the Dark Ages. It is unfun. There are a few slight tweaks that, had they been made to the combat, I feel could have made it more rewarding and less frustrating. I don't get why punching an enemy shoots you backwards. It feels wrong, especially when you're encouraged to chain multiple punches together. It just makes it feel disconnected, like I then have to run towards them between each strike in order to make them feel like they connect. Armoured enemies glow brighter and brighter until they glow, at which point you can chuck your shield at them to shatter the armour, But sometimes maybe it wasn't quite glowing enough but still looked quite orange, so I'd chuck my shield at it and it would just bounce off. There almost needs to be a more obvious glow activation, because it can be hard to tell in the heat of the moment. And I think the purple dazed state they're in, once they're on low health, could have lasted a bit longer. All too often I would deflect a green attack, like I'm supposed to, and it would activate it on a tough enemy quite some way away. And enemies that I'd spent quite some time and a lot of my ammo weakening. But then I'd be so frantically fighting off hordes left and right that by the time I get close enough to finish them off, they will have ended and the enemy will be healed back to having half their health left, or again, or however much they get. I'd then die to those enemies that I felt like I rightfully beat, and then I'd rage quit the game, before obviously loading the game up again, because just one more go, am I right? The weapons in this game though are very satisfying. You get different types, then later on you get upgraded versions of those types to cycle between. The super shotgun is by far the best weapon in the game. If you can't be bothered with the intricacies of enemies, then all you have to do is to run right up to them and to blast them a couple of times with this gun. Case closed. I think if anything there might be a few too many weapons in this game, and I'd normally be like, oh yeah, I forgot about the chain gun or grenade launcher or rocket launcher, and then I'd switch to it and then use it until its ammo was depleted, before forgetting about it again for another half an hour. You also get a few super weapons. Your melee attack can get upgraded to ridiculous levels, and this game's BFG, not wanting to spoil anything, is a great way of clearing an entire arena in one shot when it simply gets too much for you. Its ammo is incredibly scarce, but whipping this thing out and firing off a shot kind of reminds me of that bit from Indiana Jones when he dodges that boss fight. It's so powerful it's almost anticlimactic. I do prefer the way that extra lives work in this game. In Eternal, if you died and had an extra life, then it would instantly use it, whether you wanted to or not. But in this game, if you die in a silly way, then you can just start the arena fight again, saving the extra lives you've accumulated for the battles later on that really do feel unwinnable otherwise. I wish the life sigil didn't look quite so much like the helmet armor pickup. Yes, I know one of them has a force field and the other doesn't, but why would you use the same coloured and similar looking helmet icons on both? They're different things! If you fall off the side of an arena in this game, you're transported back to the top with no health penalty, and I like this. Not punishing a step put wrong is a step in the right direction in this game, even though I found a few of the harder fights in this game can be exploited by repeatedly firing off a few shots, then leaping off the side of the arena to avoid their retaliatory strikes. But what's this? Doom Guy deliberately jumping out of the combat zone? This begs the question, how Doom Guy is the Doom Guy in this Doom game? I refuse to call him the Slayer, he's the Doom Guy. Now, in Eternal, he's this flying, agile combat machine. Is that particularly manly? I think he pulled it off, but this slower, more tank-like appearance in this game certainly seems more Doom Guy at first glance. I don't mind his shield blocking, but when it becomes a matter of cycling around the outside of an arena, cowering behind his shield as all the projectiles come his way, I feel like some of the Doom Guy's reputation is being degraded somewhat. He's meant to be standing and fighting. He's meant to be taking the fight to them. He's the thing that demons fear, yet here he is being all defensive. Whereas in Eternal, he'd at least be lunging straight at them going for a glory kill, or chainsaw kill for that matter. So this game had moments where I'd feel like a coward, but for the most part I feel like the combat in the Dark Ages does justice to the Doom Guy's reputation, and it plays like a 90s arena shooter, which was all inspired by Doom in the first place, so yeah, he is the Doom Guy in this game. The problem is the cutscenes. They suck. Do you remember Doom 2016? No story, just a quick intro about ripping and tearing until it's all done. That is how you start a Doom game. At one point early on, a robot tries to deliver a story to you in the elevator, and your guy just smashes the speaker. Yeah, that's what the Doom Guy would do. That's what I want. I just want to get on with the killing. That was a game that understood why we were there. Now if we fast forward to this game, it's all cutscenes and silly characters with stupid names, and they're all trying to big up how awesome the Doom Guy is and how scary he is, and every time they do that, the Doom Guy just seems to get a bit less scary and awesome. In this regard, Doom has lost its way. We shouldn't care about the story. The Doom Guy certainly doesn't. Get rid of all that and just make the whole game an arena shooter where I get to show the demons why they should fear me. I don't have much else to say about this matter, but I feel like this segment of the video should be extended just to make it clear how much I despise the cutscenes and story that's been shoehorned into this game. The Doom Guy is an enigma. He's an unstoppable force, and the more you try to flesh out a character like the Doom Guy, the more human he becomes. So stop it, just let him rip and tear. Eternal also suffered a bit from pointless cutscenes, but the Dark Ages is 100 times worse for it. Doom 2016 and Eternal both had really catchy short intros, which I felt really gave the community some memorable quotes. The Dark Ages, sadly, does not have this. Its cutscene is longer, more convoluted, and it sets the stage for the dialogue-heavy feel of the rest of the game. It just takes me out of the core of the action. Speaking of which, the vehicle segments. They're not bad, it's just the game doesn't need them. Its arena fights are still some of the most refined and polished in the industry, so it doesn't need you to jump into Titan suits or to ride on a flying dragon. On paper it might sound fun to have some variety, like it's just extra. In Doom, more is less, and there's no way these brief segments can come close to replicating the depth and pacing that the rest of the game has almost perfected. These vehicle segments are just an annoying distraction. Ones that are soon over perhaps, but they didn't need to begin in the first place. They all just feel half-baked, compared with a classic Doom guy experience. Now it took me a while to complete the Dark Ages, because the first few times I played it, this weapon capsule that you get early on in the game failed to open, and I'd run about for a while assuming I had to do something first, but it turned out the game had just bugged. Now I assume this must have been patched because I haven't had this problem since, but it's why for the first few months this game was out, I just kept giving up on this game. A few times through the playthrough, I found myself stuck outside the arena fight I was supposed to be a part of. And again, this meant quitting and redoing the segment to make sure I was on the right side of the barriers when they went up. It just felt a bit unpolished. If this wasn't a Doom game and was instead a fresh new game series, I'd be like, yeah, it's good. Not as great as Doom is, but it's still very good on its own, and it isn't afraid of being its own thing, instead of just stealing whatever worked with Doom. I commend it for trying new stuff, and for trying more new stuff than it needed to. It really does try to reinvent the gameplay loop whilst remaining distinctly Doom-esque, and it's certainly worth playing through. I wouldn't mind playing through it again, yet I still can't help feeling a little bit disappointed with it. But please, id, keep making Doom games. I do appreciate the innovation and experimentation, and if this is what happens when things don't go right, it's still worth playing. And I can't wait to see the next game in the series. If you get the best bits of this game with the best bits of Eternal, then your next game stands to be a right banger.